My true story from Alaska. Mom, please get out of the house. My wife and your grandchild aren't comfortable with you here anymore. That's what my own son, Evan, said to me on a gray morning when the snow outside the kitchen window was falling in lazy, tired sheets, and the coffee in my mug had already gone cold from sitting too long in my shaking hands. I was standing there, in the home I'd once built with the man who taught me how to fish under the midnight sun and how to listen to the world when it went quiet in winter. Now my son stood across the table from me, not a trace of kindness in his voice. My daughter-in-law, Amanda, stood behind him, her arms crossed, lips pinched tight as the icicles hanging off the old porch. She didn't even look at me. She was holding my little granddaughter, Lucy, on her hip like a shield. Lucy's hair was the same honey color as Evan's had been at her age, and for a moment I thought maybe she'd look at me, smile, remember the bedtime stories I told her about foxes and the northern lights. But Amanda just turned away, whispering something to Lucy about breakfast, as if I wasn't even there. I was 68 years old, and I had never felt so invisible. You might wonder how a woman like me ended up unwanted in her own family's house. It wasn't always like this. Evan used to call me every Sunday from Anchorage just to ask about my knees or whether I'd baked bread that week. When he was a boy, I'd walk him to school in boots 3 sizes too big, him stumbling through the snow, his little hand swallowed in mine. I taught him to listen for the ptarmigans in the brush and how to get a fish without flinching. Back then, he said I was the bravest person he knew. But time can make a person's memory slippery, and I guess the world teaches you to see old women as just shadows in the corner, useful when there's a pie to bake or a child to mind, but too much trouble when there's a new wife in the house, a new baby, and not enough space for quiet old ghosts. Evan and Amanda had invited me to stay with them last winter, after I slipped on the ice and broke my hip. They said it was just until I healed, just until the spring. I tried to be helpful, folding laundry, making dinner, fixing the loose boards in the back steps when Evan kept forgetting. Amanda never seemed happy to see me. She watched me the way you watch a fox circle the chicken coop. She was polite enough, but cold, always cold. If Lucy reached for my hand, Amanda would step between us, gently but firm. I told myself it was just a new mother's nerves. I told myself a lot of things. But that morning, with Evan's words ringing in my ears, I realized I'd been fooling myself. I wasn't family here. I was a burden, a stranger, someone to be removed. I didn't say anything right away. I watched Amanda carry Lucy out of the room, her voice too loud and cheerful, asking if she wanted pancakes or oatmeal, anything to drown out the tension. Evan looked at the floor. He never looked at me when he was ashamed. "Evan," I said finally, my voice so soft I barely recognized it. "Is this what you really want? After everything?" He looked up, and for a second I saw a flash of the boy he used to be, the one who used to bring me wildflowers after school and write me clumsy cards on Mother's Day. But that was gone in a blink. "I can't. Amanda and we just need our own space."
"It's too much, Mom."
"You're always here. You hover." Amanda feels like she can't breathe. And Lucy, she's been acting different. Maybe she's picking up on all the tension. It's not good for her. I could have argued. I could have begged. But 68 years teaches you what pride means. My hands shook, but I kept them at my sides. I nodded. "Of course," I said. "I'll pack my things." I went upstairs to the small guest room they'd given me. The one Amanda had insisted was just temporary, even after months, and started folding my sweaters, rolling up the quilts I'd made by hand when Evan was a boy. I packed my old photo album, the one with the sun-faded pictures of my late husband, Jim, holding Evan on his shoulders at the fishing dock, both of them grinning like fools. I heard Amanda and Evan whispering in the kitchen, their voices low but urgent. I heard Lucy laugh, a high, bright sound, and it cut through me. I wondered if she'd remember me at all. I left that afternoon. The roads were slick with new snow, and the sky was already darkening even though it was barely past 3. I drove my old Subaru back to the small cabin I'd rented out in Eagle River, the same place Evan was born, before we lost Jim, before the world turned so quiet and cold. I didn't cry on the drive. Not once. but my hands ached from gripping the wheel too tight. That night, in the lonely dark, I sat at the kitchen table with my cold cup of tea and stared at the old clock ticking on the wall. The house felt hollow, every corner echoing with memories of laughter, stories, Christmas mornings that smelled like cinnamon and spruce. I could hear Jim's voice in my head. "Don't let the world make you small, Ruth. You're stronger than the snow and quieter than the storm." But that night, I felt as small as the last leaf clinging to a birch tree in December. Still, something inside me, something old and stubborn, refused to break. The world might have turned its back on me, but I would not let myself vanish. Not quietly, not completely, because silence is not surrender, and age does not mean weakness. And so began my quiet revenge. The wind rattled the windows all night, and I barely slept. When the first pale light crept across the snow outside, I was already up, standing in the chilly kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of weak tea. There's a particular kind of silence in Alaska in the early morning, a hush that settles over everything, as if the world is holding its breath. I let it fill me, steadied my nerves with the memory of every long winter I'd survived before. I wasn't angry. Not yet. There wasn't room for anger. Only the slow ache of being unwanted, like a splinter that won't work itself out. But underneath the ache, I felt something harder, a stubborn seed planted deep that would not let me be erased. That day I started a new routine. I'd always kept to myself, but now I kept my distance by necessity. I called the clinic where I'd volunteered before my accident and asked if they needed extra help. "We always need help, Ruth," the nurse said, her voice warm and familiar. "The flu's going around, and most of the volunteers are staying home." I went in that afternoon, bundled up against the cold, boots crunching through the old snow in the parking lot. The clinic was full, crying children, coughing elders, tired parents desperate for someone to listen. No one here cared that I was old, or that my own son had sent me away. Here, I was Ruth, the woman who could wrap a child's arm in a sling with one hand and distract him with stories about river otters with the other. I worked until my back ached and my fingers went numb. When I left, the nurse pressed a tin of cookies into my hands and said, "You're a godsend. You know that?" I smiled and said thank you, but the words stayed with me all the way home. Godsend. Not burden. Not ghost. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my cell phone. My son hadn't called. Neither had Amanda. I wondered if Lucy missed me, if she asked where Grandma had gone. The phone stayed silent. A week passed. Then another. Each day I went to the clinic. Each night I came home to my empty house, cooked myself a small meal, and tried not to let the silence feel like defeat. But news travels fast in a small town. At the grocery store, people started to notice. "Back on your feet, Ruth?" the butcher asked, handing me a bag of frozen halibut. "Just keeping busy," I said, my smile thin but real. A few days later, I saw Amanda at the supermarket, pushing a cart with Lucy sitting in the front. Amanda's eyes slid right past me, cold as ever, but Lucy waved her little mitten at me. "Grandma," she cried, her voice echoing in the aisles. Amanda stiffened, turning her cart away so fast I thought she might tip it over. I let them go, my heart pounding. I could still be erased, even in public. I realized then how thoroughly Amanda had shut me out. It was at church the next Sunday that the whispers started. I sat in my usual pew, surrounded by old friends, when Mrs. Park leaned in and patted my hand. "You're staying alone now, dear?" she asked, her voice kind but prying. I nodded. Evan and Amanda needed space. Young families, you know how it is. Her eyes softened. "You're a good mother, Ruth. Always have been. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The words made me want to cry, but I just nodded and thanked her, folding my hands in my lap. Later that week, a blizzard hit. The power went out for hours. I lit candles and bundled in quilts, watching the snow pile up against the door. I thought of Evan and Amanda's new house, a big place, with fancy appliances, a generator, and all the comforts I'd never dreamed of at their age. Did they think of me at all, alone in the dark, my breath fogging the windows. I wondered if Amanda even cared. One afternoon, about a month after I'd left, I got a call from Lucy's daycare. I hadn't seen her since the grocery store, but I recognized the director's voice. "Ms. Waller? This is Karen at Little Cubs. I just wanted to check in. Lucy's been asking for you. She misses her grandma." My chest tightened. "Tell her I love her," I said, my voice thick, "and that I'll see her soon." After I hung up, I stared out at the endless white and made a decision. I wouldn't beg to be let back in. I wouldn't call Evan, wouldn't plead with Amanda. But I wouldn't disappear either. I'd lived through too much: widowhood, hard winters, broken bones, and broken dreams, to be erased now. I started volunteering more, at the food pantry, the library, even reading stories to kids at the shelter. Everywhere I went, I heard my name in people's mouths. Ruth helped me with my boy's medicine. Ruth fixed the old furnace. Ruth's stories made the children laugh. My world grew, even as my family closed theirs. But then came the moment that changed everything. One night, just as I was heading to bed, there was a loud banging on my door. I shuffled over, startled, and opened it to find Evan standing in the snow, face pale, eyes wild. He was shivering, jacket unzipped, hair mussed.
Mom,
I didn't know where else to go. Behind him, Amanda sat in their car, arms wrapped around Lucy, who was sobbing. "What happened?" I asked, stepping aside to let him in. My voice was calm, but inside my heart thundered. Evan swallowed hard, looking at the floor. "Amanda's father, he's sick. Really sick. She wants to fly back to the lower 48, but Lucy's terrified of flying. She just keeps asking for you. She won't stop crying. Amanda doesn't want to leave her here," but he trailed off, ashamed. It hit me all at once. The coldness, the distance, the insult, all crumbling beneath the weight of real fear. My son, so proud, now desperate for help. Not because he loved me, but because he needed me. Because, in the end, even the strongest walls can't keep out the winter. I could have shut the door. I could have told him to leave, that I'd found my own life, my own family. I could have let him taste the bitterness of rejection, let him feel what it was like to be invisible. But I didn't. I knelt down, held out my arms, and said, "Go bring Lucy in. She can stay with Grandma tonight." Because revenge, true revenge, isn't always about shouting or slamming doors or making others hurt the way you hurt. Sometimes, revenge is quiet. Sometimes, it's the strength to help when you've been pushed away, to show the world that your silence was never weakness. That's the revenge that whispers instead of screams. As the wind howled outside, I held Lucy close, her small arms clinging to my neck. In the dark, her tears slowed, and she fell asleep in my arms, warm and trusting. And that's when I knew my story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The fire crackled softly as Lucy slept curled up on the old green couch, her breath slow and peaceful against my shoulder. For the first time in weeks, the cabin felt warm again, alive even. Evan and Amanda stayed only long enough for Amanda to pack for her trip. She barely looked at me, her lips drawn thin, eyes red from crying or maybe just exhaustion. Evan mumbled an apology that didn't land, his gaze darting anywhere but my face. As soon as Amanda left for the airport, Evan dropped onto the kitchen stool, hunched over like a boy in trouble. I made him tea, the same way I used to after his nightmares, 2 sugars, a splash of milk. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. "I know you're angry," he said finally, voice rough. "Amanda's always been protective of Lucy. She thought it was best." I stirred my tea, watching the steam rise. "I've lived a long time, Evan. I know what it feels like to be pushed out. It's not new, but it hurts most when it's your own son doing the pushing." He flinched, looking away. For a moment I wanted to reach for him, but my hands stayed still. Some wounds heal best in the cold air. Lucy woke late, blinking in the half-light, her cheeks flushed. She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Grandma, are you staying forever?" I knelt, smoothing her hair. "For as long as you need, love. Grandma's not going anywhere tonight." Those days with Lucy were bomb and salt all at once. She brought her little drawings, filling my fridge with stick figure families, always including me, always drawing the sun shining over our heads. We baked bread, fed the crows out back, read stories under a quilt as the snow pressed in close. At night, she'd whisper secrets into my ear, things she was scared to tell her parents. "Mommy cries when she thinks I'm sleeping," she said one night, voice small. "Daddy yells at the walls. I like your house better, Grandma. It's quiet." I listened. That's all I did. Listened, and let her know she was seen, heard, safe. The quiet strength my own mother had once shown me, I gave to her. Evan started coming by more often. He'd show up after work, too tired to talk, but always staying longer than he meant. I noticed the small things. The way he sat a little straighter, the way he lingered at the door, the way he looked at Lucy with a longing I hadn't seen before. One night, after Lucy fell asleep, he sat at the table with his head in his hands. "Amanda's father might not make it," he said. "She's falling apart. And I don't know what to do anymore, Mom. Everything's a mess." I wanted to reach across the table, but the hurt was still too fresh. Instead, I offered what I could. "You know, Evan, sometimes the quietest people hold the most together. Your father used to say that. You don't have to fix everything. Just be there. And let the people who love you help." He nodded, swallowing hard. As the days passed, word spread through the community. "Ruth's got her granddaughter with her," Mrs. Park whispered at church. "She's looking after Evan's girl. That family's been through so much." People started dropping off casseroles, bags of groceries, tiny handmade mittens for Lucy. No one asked why Evan and Amanda needed help. Alaskans know how to rally around their own, even when they don't know the whole story. I didn't see Amanda for almost 2 weeks. When she finally returned, she came straight to the cabin, eyes rimmed with red, suitcase thumping against the steps. She looked exhausted, older than her years, worn thin by grief. She barely made it through the door before she started to cry. Not loud, not showy, just quiet tears, as if she was ashamed of them. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for taking care of her. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been here." For a moment, I saw the scared girl beneath the sharp words and cold glances, the one who'd married my son, hoping for a home, a future, a place in the world. I let her cry. When she finished, I handed her a cup of tea, the way I'd done for Evan, the way my own mother had once done for me. That night, after they all left, I stood by the window and watched the snow swirl around the porch light. I thought about the years I'd spent being quiet, holding back, letting myself be made small. And I thought about the strength it took to stay, sometimes invisible, sometimes unwelcome, always steady. I realized my quiet was never weakness. It was the strength to hold on, to help, to be the anchor even when no one else saw it. But my story, my real revenge, wasn't finished yet. For all the times Amanda had erased me, for every cold shoulder, every harsh word, she would know, now, what it meant to need someone she'd pushed away. And Evan, my son, who had chosen comfort over kindness, would see with his own eyes the cost of forgetting who'd raised him. The quiet can be sharp as ice. Sometimes it's the loudest scream of all. That winter seemed longer than any I could remember. The snow never let up, swirling in wild gusts outside my window, and sometimes it felt as if the world was trying to bury everything I loved under a blanket of white. But inside my cabin, with Lucy's laughter bouncing off the walls and the soft glow of the fireplace warming our faces, I remembered what it felt like to belong. After Amanda returned, something between us shifted. She was still cautious, still guarded, but there was a new kind of respect in the way she looked at me, a hesitant gratitude, as though she'd seen me for the first time. She'd stay a little longer when dropping Lucy off, asking questions about her routine, listening to my suggestions without bristling. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch her standing at the kitchen counter, twisting her wedding ring, her eyes glassy. She never said much, but the silence between us wasn't icy anymore. It was waiting, open, uncertain, but not unkind. Evan, for his part, began to thaw too. There were still wounds between us, but he tried in his awkward, halting way to bridge the gap. He'd bring groceries without being asked, stay for dinner, linger just to tell Lucy another story. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd watch Amanda with a sadness in his eyes, as if mourning the man he'd almost become, someone cold, indifferent, too busy for his own mother. I could see the guilt weighing on him, but I let him carry it. Some lessons have to hurt before they heal. Lucy flourished. She grew braver, bolder, her laugh louder, her questions endless. She told everyone at church and the store, and even at the post office, that she was staying with Grandma now, and that Grandma made the best cinnamon rolls in Alaska. I watched her claim her place in the world with all the quiet confidence I'd tried to teach my own son. But outside my little haven, the world spun on. Amanda's father passed away quietly, and though Amanda barely spoke of it, the grief settled over her like another layer of winter. She withdrew again, snapping at Evan, hiding from Lucy, falling back into her old, cold ways. It hurt to watch, but I knew this kind of pain, knew that no one could rush it. One night, after a week of tense silences, Evan showed up on my doorstep, soaked with melted snow, Lucy fast asleep in his arms. Amanda had locked herself in the bedroom, he said. He just needed a place to breathe, to remember what warmth felt like. I laid Lucy in my bed, tucked her in tight, then sat at the table with Evan while he wept for the first time since he was a child. He sobbed for his wife, his father-in-law, for the shame of pushing me away, for the weight of being needed by everyone and loved by no one. "Mom," he said, his voice raw, "I'm so sorry for what I did. I didn't know what else to do. I thought Amanda needed space. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought," he broke off, shaking. I reached out and took his hand. For the first time, I saw my son as a man, broken, uncertain, desperate for forgiveness. "I know you did," I said softly, "but I'm still here." That's what mothers do, Evan. We stay, even when we're told to go, even when it hurts. The next morning, Amanda called. She didn't apologize, but her voice was softer, brittle. "Thank you for taking care of Lucy," she said. I'm not ready to see anyone yet, but maybe when I am, we could talk." I agreed, not pushing, not demanding. The old me, before all the pain, all the rejection, would have tried to fix everything, to make Amanda love me, to force a happy ending. But I was older now, wiser. I knew you couldn't force love or trust. You could only show up again and again until the world noticed you wouldn't leave. That was the start of my quiet revenge. Not spite, not shouting, not grand gestures. Just steadfastness. Just kindness that didn't ask for anything in return. Slowly, things began to heal. Amanda started joining us for Sunday dinners, at first tense and silent, then gradually warming as Lucy drew her in. Evan and I repaired old wounds, one gentle conversation at a time. And Lucy, sweet, bright Lucy, became the bridge that held us all together. But the world never forgets an old woman's silence. People noticed the change. At church, at the store, at the post office, everyone whispered about the family that had fallen apart and come back together, about the mother who had been thrown out and returned, stronger and quieter than before. Mrs. Park patted my hand after service one morning. "You're like the spruce, Ruth. Bent, but never broken." But I knew the truth. I was the wind, too. The one that shapes the trees, silent and unseen, but powerful just the same. And I hadn't finished making my mark. That Sunday, Amanda pulled me aside before dinner, her voice trembling. "I've been wrong about you, Ruth. I see it now. I see what you do for Lucy. For Evan. For me." Her eyes shone with unshed tears. "I want you here. In our lives. Please don't go." For the first time, she didn't sound like she was asking out of duty or desperation. She was asking because she finally understood. I hugged her, feeling the last shards of bitterness melt away. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered. "Not now. Not ever." But a part of me knew this was only the beginning. The world had changed, but so had I. And my story, my quiet, whispered revenge, was still unfolding. Amanda's words echoed in my mind long after she left my kitchen that night, her voice hesitant, almost frightened by her own vulnerability. I stood at the window after she'd gone, watching the northern lights shimmer faintly over the pines, and wondered when exactly the world had changed. Once, I'd been a ghost in this family, haunting the edges of their lives, never quite belonging. Now, slowly, I was becoming something different. Not just a grandmother or a mother-in-law, but a presence, quiet, steady, undeniable. The winter wore on, brutal and beautiful, as only Alaska can be. Each morning, I rose before dawn and went about my routine, stoking the fire, shoveling the porch, putting on coffee and baking bread for the day ahead. Lucy became my shadow, following me in her woolen socks, chattering about her dreams and fears and the things her parents said when they thought she wasn't listening. There was a wisdom in her innocence, questions that struck deeper than any grown-ups. "Grandma, why do grown-ups get so sad? Does the snow make them lonely?" I'd tuck her hair behind her ear, smile softly, and answer in the way old women have always answered children, with half-truths, with stories. "Snow makes you think about all the people you miss," I'd say. "But it also reminds you you're still here, still standing." Sometimes I caught Evan standing in the doorway, just watching us, his eyes dark, face drawn, as if he was seeing his childhood play out all over again. He'd stay for hours, fixing leaky faucets or splitting wood, just to be near the warmth, just to be near us. I never asked him why he didn't go home earlier. He never said. Amanda, too, changed, slowly, warily, as if afraid the thaw between us was only temporary. She'd bring over soup, her own recipes, always enough for 3. She started sitting with me at the table while Lucy napped, stirring her tea in nervous circles, asking for advice on things I thought she'd never trust me with, how to manage Lucy's outbursts, how to stretch Evan's paycheck to the end of the month, how to grieve when you have to be strong for everyone else. It was strange being needed again. I realized how much I'd missed it, even as I told myself I didn't. But with every day that passed, I felt the shift in the air. Old friends started visiting more, drawn by the aroma of bread and laughter that spilled from my windows. They'd stay for coffee, share stories of lost husbands and stubborn sons, and I'd listen, always listen. I saw myself reflected in their faces, women made invisible by age and habit, now coming alive again, if only for an hour at my kitchen table. One afternoon, I sat with Mrs. Park as she cried over her son, lost to drink and distance. "He doesn't call anymore," she wept, voice trembling. "Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers I'm still here." I squeezed her hand, feeling her pain as if it were my own. "We remember for them," I said. "That's what mothers do, even when they don't want us to." The weeks slipped by, each one carrying me further from the hurt of that day Evan asked me to leave. But the wound was still there, buried deep, and I tended it like an old scar, touching it gently, never letting it close all the way. Then, as spring crept in on the heels of a stubborn winter, something happened that changed everything again. It was a Saturday morning, the first real thaw of the year. Lucy was outside, chasing the last stubborn snowdrifts, her laughter ringing through the yard. I was baking bread, Amanda beside me, when the phone rang. Amanda answered, her face going pale as she listened. "It's my sister," she whispered, pressing the receiver to her chest. "Mom fell. She's in the hospital. I need to go back. Evan can't take off work, and Lucy's too scared to fly again." She looked at me, panic and guilt warring in her eyes. Would you mind keeping Lucy a few more days? I know it's a lot to ask." I didn't let her finish. "She's always welcome here," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You go. Take care of your mother. We'll be fine." She hugged me then, sudden and fierce, her tears dampening my shoulder. "Thank you, Ruth. Thank you so much. I don't know what I'd do without you." After she left, Evan came by to check on us. He was quieter than usual, haunted by old regrets, but grateful. He fixed the broken fence in the yard, replaced the loose step on the porch, all the while watching Lucy play through the window as if seeing her for the first time. "Mom," he said, as we sipped coffee that evening, "I'm sorry for everything. For what I said. For how I let Amanda treat you. For not standing up for you when I should have." I looked at him, my boy now a man with lines at the corners of his eyes and worry graying his hair. I reached over and covered his hand with mine. "You did what you thought was right," I told him. "Sometimes we make mistakes. That's what being human is. But we learn. We come back. That's what matters." He nodded, tears shining in his eyes. "I'll do better. I promise." That night, with Lucy sleeping peacefully in her little cot, I sat by the fire and let myself feel something close to peace for the first time in years. My family was broken, yes, but mending. And I was the thread, quiet and strong, stitching us back together. But the real revenge, the one that had been growing inside me all winter, was still waiting. I could feel it, whispering beneath the surface, a lesson they'd remember, even if I never spoke it out loud. Because sometimes revenge isn't about hurting those who hurt you. Sometimes it's about becoming so essential, so quietly powerful, that your absence would leave the world colder than any Alaskan night. The strength to stay, to forgive, to keep loving, these are the weapons of the overlooked, the silenced, the mothers and grandmothers of this world. And mine was just beginning to be felt. The days passed slowly, sunlight lingering a little longer each evening, the snow melting into thick mud that Lucy splashed through with delight. With Amanda gone to tend to her mother, it was just me, Lucy, and the quiet, punctuated by her bright voice and the gentle rhythm of our days. We had our routines, feeding the chickadees, kneading dough, painting stones for the garden. Sometimes, Evan would stop by after work, covered in sawdust and apologies, always bringing some small thing, a new coloring book for Lucy, wildflowers for the table, or just as presents, which was gift enough. One night, as we sat by the fire, Lucy crawled into my lap and looked up at me, her eyes as wide as the northern sky. "Grandma, why do people leave each other? Why did Mommy go away?" Her questions always cut straight to the heart. I stroked her hair and tried to answer honestly. Sometimes people have to help the ones they love. Sometimes they need to fix something inside themselves before they can come back. But that doesn't mean they don't love you, sweetheart. She pressed her face into my shoulder, sighing. "I wish she would come back soon. I like when it's just us, but I want her to see how brave I am now." I promised her Amanda would return, and I meant it, though I knew the wounds between mother and daughter might never truly heal. I thought about my own son, how easily love can turn into silence, how quickly distance becomes a habit. But here, in this tiny cabin, we fought the world's cold by clinging to one another. The town noticed as small towns do. At the market, Mrs. Park smiled when she saw us. "You've got your hands full, Ruth, but you look stronger than ever." Even the pastor, who'd watched my family drift apart over the years, started inviting us to Sunday supper, as if he sensed the thaw in our hearts. I saw Amanda's friends around town, too, and heard the whispers, the ones that used to sting, now just rolling off me like melting snow. "She's the backbone, you know," I overheard one say at the library, thinking I was out of earshot. They'd fall apart without her. Amanda didn't know what she had. I didn't let pride touch me. I just kept on, day after day, being steady, silent, and present. Each night, I'd write a little in my journal, just small observations, reminders to myself that I still had a story, even if it was written in the margins. A week after Amanda left, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Evan, shoulders slumped, looking younger and more lost than I'd ever seen him. "Can I come in, Mom?" "Of course." He sat at the table, wringing his hands, staring at the faded linoleum. Amanda called. "Her mother's doing better, but she's not ready to come home. She asked if Lucy could stay with you for another week." He met my eyes, his voice trembling. "I want to help. I want to be a better father.
But I don't know how."
I don't know if I'm enough." I reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing it gently. You don't have to be perfect, Evan. You just have to be present. Lucy doesn't care if you say the wrong thing or forget to make her favorite dinner. She cares that you show up. That's all any of us ever wanted. His eyes filled with tears. For a long moment, he said nothing, just sat with the weight of his regrets and the hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to start over. That night, after Lucy fell asleep, Evan and I sat by the fire in silence. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable, safe. I remembered all the nights I'd sat like this with his father, Jim, sharing our lives without words, letting the world turn outside while we held fast to each other. Mom, Evan said softly, breaking the silence, I never realized how much I needed you. Not until I tried to live without you. I'm sorry for all of it, for letting Amanda push you out, for not standing up for you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was just scared. Scared of losing her. Scared of failing Lucy. Scared of admitting I still needed my mom. I put my hand on his cheek, brushing away a tear. We all need someone, Evan. Even when we're old, even when we're strong. There's no shame in that. And you haven't lost me. You never could. We talked late into the night, about Amanda, about Lucy, about the ways families break and mend, about how forgiveness isn't a single act but 1,000 small choices. I saw the man I'd raised reemerge in him, softer, kinder, more humble. He left before sunrise, promising to come back soon. The next morning, Lucy and I made cinnamon rolls, filling the house with sweetness. We sat at the table, eating warm pastries, sunlight flooding the room. She grinned up at me, her teeth sticky with icing. Grandma, can we stay like this forever? I laughed and hugged her close. Forever's a long time, little one. But I'll be here as long as you need me. The world outside was still uncertain. Amanda's grief, Evan's guilt, the weight of being unwanted, they all lingered, ghosts in the corners of my heart. But for the first time in a long while, I felt more than just useful. I felt necessary. Not just to Lucy or Evan, but to myself. And that, I realized, was the beginning of my real revenge. Not in angry words or slammed doors, but in refusing to vanish. In proving, day by day, that the quiet ones, the ones overlooked, set aside, dismissed, are the ones the world can't live without. My story wasn't a tragedy after all. It was a lesson, one the people I loved would never forget. The world outside shifted slowly from white to gray as spring threatened to claim the last stubborn mounds of snow. Lucy and I hung her tiny mittens by the fire to dry, listening to the water drip from the roof in a slow, steady rhythm. Some days, the mud made it almost impossible to get into town, but we didn't mind. In the cocoon of my small cabin, we were safe from the storms of the world, wrapped in warmth, cinnamon, and stories. One evening, Lucy curled up beside me on the old sofa, a blanket pulled up to her chin, her eyes wide and solemn. "Grandma," she said, "will Mommy ever be happy again?" The question caught me off guard. Children notice everything, the tightness in a mother's smile, the exhaustion in a father's voice, the sadness that lingers like a shadow even in the sunniest room. I stroked her hair, gathering my thoughts. "Your mommy has a heavy heart right now," I said. "Sometimes when people lose someone they love, it feels like winter inside them, even when it's spring outside. But hearts can thaw, too, little one. Especially when people around them are patient and kind." Lucy mulled that over, twisting the end of her braid in her fingers. "Do you ever get sad, Grandma?" I laughed softly. "Oh, I do. But I have you to remind me how much there is to love." She smiled, satisfied, and tucked her head beneath my arm. For a moment, the world felt simple. But nothing stays simple for long. That night, after I tucked Lucy in and kissed her goodnight, I sat alone at the kitchen table, memories pressing in as surely as the darkness outside. I remembered my own mother, her hands strong and sure, her voice steady as the earth, even when the world crumbled around her. She'd taught me that silence was a kind of strength. "People may forget your words, Ruth," she'd say, but they'll remember how you stood, quiet, steady, unbreakable. Was I really living up to that legacy? Or was I just letting the world pass me by, content to play nursemaid to my broken family? The questions swirled as I wrote in my journal, the lines shaky but certain. I wrote about Lucy's laughter, the way Evan looked when he thought no one was watching, the feeling of being necessary again, even if only for a little while. I wrote about Amanda, her sadness and pride, her walls slowly crumbling. I wrote about forgiveness, not the grand kind that makes headlines, but the daily, ordinary forgiveness that lets a family mend, one meal, one conversation, one kindness at a time. As I finished my tea, I heard a car crunch up the drive. I peered out into the fading light, heart stuttering. It was Amanda, hair pulled back, face pale and set. She got out of the car slowly, shoulders hunched against the cold that lingered even in April. She knocked softly, almost as if she hoped I wouldn't answer. I opened the door wide. "Come in, Amanda. You're just in time for a cup of tea." She hesitated, eyes darting past me as if looking for ghosts. "Is Lucy asleep?" "Just went down. She'll be glad to see you in the morning." Amanda nodded and slipped inside, her movements awkward and uncertain. I set the kettle to boil, moving around the kitchen in the easy, silent dance of someone who has known this space and this pain for too long. We sat across from each other at the table, the air between us thick with all the things we hadn't said. Amanda broke the silence first. "My mother's better. She'll need some help for a while, but she's out of danger." She fiddled with her mug, eyes fixed on the rim. I thought about staying down there longer, but she glanced at me, then away. "But I miss my family. I miss Lucy." I nodded, not pressing, letting her fill the silence at her own pace. "I was scared," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Scared I was losing everything. Scared of how much I needed you. I was so used to being in control, so used to doing things my way. When you moved in, I felt crowded, like there wasn't enough space for all of us. But when you were gone, the house felt empty. Evan was lost. Lucy was miserable. I kept thinking, maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I pushed you away because I was afraid you'd see how badly I was failing." She finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. "But you never judged me. You just waited. And you were there for Lucy and Evan, even when we didn't deserve it." I reached across the table and took her hand, warm and trembling. "We all make mistakes, Amanda. I've made plenty. But we find our way back by being kind. That's how families survive." Her tears spilled over then, silent and steady. I let her cry, the way I had for Lucy, for Evan, for myself. When she was finished, she squeezed my hand, grateful and humble. "Will you come home, Ruth? Will you be part of our family again? Not just as Lucy's grandma or Evan's mother, but as yourself? I need you. We all do." The words, so simple and sincere, nearly broke me. For a long time, I'd thought I'd lost everything: a place to belong, people to love, a voice that mattered. Now, all at once, it came back to me, not with shouts or drama, but with a quiet invitation and an honest heart. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Amanda smiled, a real, bright, unguarded smile. "Let's go get you and Lucy packed up tomorrow. I want you both home." The next morning, we told Lucy the news. She squealed with joy, hugging us both so tight it hurt. "I told you Mommy would come back. I told you we'd all be together." Packing was bittersweet. The little cabin that had been my refuge was now just a place, not a home. I folded each quilt, each photograph, each memory, knowing they'd find new meaning in a house that had once been cold but was now, slowly, warming to my presence. Evan met us at the door when we arrived, his face brighter than I'd seen in months. He hugged Amanda, then Lucy, then, after a moment's hesitation, me. "Welcome home, Mom." That first night, we sat together in the living room, the four of us, each carrying our own scars, our own stories, but sharing the same firelight. Lucy curled in my lap, Amanda leaning against Evan, and for a few precious hours, All the hurt seemed far away. We fell into new routines. I cooked dinner most nights, Amanda helping or just keeping me company. Evan took over the bedtime stories, his deep voice soothing Lucy into dreams. Sometimes, after everyone else had gone to bed, Amanda and I would sit in the kitchen, talking quietly about the past, the future, our hopes and fears. She started to trust me, slowly, piece by piece, and I did my best to honor that trust. But the world hadn't stopped turning. There were new challenges every day, bills to pay, hurts to heal, old habits to unlearn. Some nights Amanda would still pull away, lost in her own thoughts. Sometimes Evan would get short-tempered, snapping at me or at Lucy. But we worked through it together. We remembered what it felt like to be alone, and we fought in our quiet ways to never let each other feel that again. Lucy flourished most of all. Her drawings covered the fridge, always with four figures now, sometimes holding hands, sometimes smiling, but always together. She invited friends over for cookies, introducing me proudly as the best grandma in the whole world. The house rang with laughter, warmth, and, sometimes, even music. Spring crept into summer. I planted a small garden in the backyard, Lucy helping dig in the dirt, Amanda and Evan watching from the porch. The neighbors noticed how the yard had never looked so alive, how the house always smelled of bread and flowers. People stopped by more often, bringing news, sharing burdens, looking for comfort in the home that had once been so closed off. One afternoon, Mrs. Park came for tea. She looked around at the bright kitchen, the happy chaos of family life, and smiled. "You did it, Ruth. You brought them back together. You turned silence into strength." I smiled, my heart full. "I just stayed, that's all. Sometimes that's the hardest thing." She squeezed my hand. "Not everyone can. Most people give up, fade away. But you," she shook her head, eyes shining, "you remind us all that silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the most powerful voice of all." That night, as the sun barely dipped below the horizon and the air shimmered with the promise of summer, I sat on the porch and watched my family through the window. Amanda was laughing with Evan as they washed dishes. Lucy twirled in circles, singing to herself. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt at peace. But I knew my story wasn't just for me. It was for every mother and grandmother who had ever been pushed aside, overlooked, made to feel invisible. It was for everyone who had suffered in silence, waiting for the world to notice they were still here. And soon, I realized, I would have the chance to share it. Summer unfolded in gentle, golden waves, and our house blossomed with the kind of happiness that takes root quietly, below the noise. I started keeping the windows open all day, letting in the scent of lilacs and the buzz of bees. Even on the hottest afternoons, a cool breeze drifted through, carrying the sound of Lucy's laughter as she chased butterflies across the grass. The memory of that winter, the cold, the silence, the sharp ache of being unwanted, never left me completely. It pressed at the edges, a reminder of how quickly things could change and how easily love could be lost or reclaimed. Living with Evan and Amanda again wasn't always easy. We had to learn each other's rhythms, the little quirks and habits that once grated now softened by time and forgiveness. Amanda still struggled, sometimes withdrawing for hours, her grief over her father like a tide that came and went. I gave her space, never pressing, letting her find her own way back each time. Evan busied himself with repairs, painting the shed, mending a broken fence, planting sunflowers at Lucy's request. He'd come in with dirt on his hands, tired but smiling, gratitude shining in his eyes when he saw me setting dinner on the table or reading quietly with Lucy in the shade. The biggest change, perhaps, was in myself. I'd always thought of revenge as something sharp and loud, a thing you brandished or shouted for the world to hear. But mine was quieter, deeper, a slow, steady reclaiming of my worth. I gave my love and care freely, not out of obligation but as a declaration. I was here, I mattered, and nothing would erase me from this family again. Sometimes, old memories returned to test my resolve. One night, as I tucked Lucy in, she whispered. Grandma, are you ever going to leave again? I sat on the edge of her bed and brushed a strand of hair from her eyes. No, little one. I promise. I'm staying for as long as you want me here. She nodded, satisfied, pulling her favorite quilt up to her chin.
Good.
Because the house is happier when you're here. Out in the hallway, I found Amanda waiting. Her eyes were red, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. Thank you, she said, voice barely above a whisper. For coming back. For forgiving me. For loving us. Even when we didn't deserve it. I took her hands in mine. Family isn't about never making mistakes. It's about coming back, again and again, no matter how hard it gets. We're all learning, Amanda. Even me. That was the night Amanda truly let me in. We sat together at the kitchen table, the clock ticking softly, the world outside bathed in a pale, midnight sun. She told me things she'd never said before about her fears, her childhood, her guilt over pushing me out. I listened not as a judge, but as someone who understood what it meant to feel alone in a crowd. After that, things changed in small but steady ways. Amanda invited me to help her plan Lucy's birthday, trusting me with the details she once guarded so closely. Evan began talking about the future, family trips, holidays, maybe even moving to a bigger house someday if I wanted to come along. Lucy flourished, her confidence blooming like the wildflowers in our backyard. She started inviting her friends over, bragging about her super grandma, and showing them how to bake bread or spot constellations in the endless Alaskan sky. The community saw the change, too. People who had once pitted or dismissed me now sought my advice, asked for my recipes, invited me to gatherings I'd never been welcome at before. One afternoon, Mrs. Park stopped me outside the grocery store, her arms full of rhubarb. I heard about everything you've done, Ruth. Not just for your family, but for the whole town. You're the strongest woman I know. I smiled, humbled but proud. Sometimes strength is just staying. That's all. Still, there were moments when the old hurt flared up, a careless word, a shadow of suspicion, a night when the house felt too big and quiet. I allowed myself to feel it, to remember the ache, but I never let it turn to bitterness. That was my real victory. Not to erase the past, but to build something better on top of it. As the first autumn leaves began to turn, I found myself reflecting on the journey I'd taken. The woman who left this house in tears, banished by her own son, wasn't gone. She lived inside me still, older, wiser, tempered by sorrow and joy alike. But she was not defeated. She was not invisible. She was the heart of her family, and she would never let herself be overlooked again. One evening, as dusk painted the world in gold, we all gathered on the porch. Evan brought out his old guitar, strumming softly while Lucy sang along, her voice sweet and clear. Amanda leaned her head on my shoulder, sighing contentedly. For a moment, everything felt whole. I looked at each of them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my granddaughter, and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it brought tears to my eyes. Silence is not surrender, I said quietly, almost to myself. Age does not mean weakness. Sometimes the strongest revenge is to keep loving, to keep standing, until the world remembers how much it needs you. Evan squeezed my hand. We do need you, Mom. We always have. Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes. We're better because of you, Ruth. I'm better. Lucy wrapped her arms around my waist, looking up with a smile. You're my favorite person, Grandma. I held them close, letting the warmth of their love seep into every corner that had once been cold. And that's my story. If you have a story of your own, if you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or cast aside, know that you are not alone. Quiet strength can move mountains, mend families, and change the world, one silent act at a time. If my story spoke to your heart, share your own below. And if you found hope in these words, please subscribe, because every story deserves to be heard, and every silent voice deserves its day in the sun. The Alaskan nights grew longer again, as if the sun itself was reluctant to leave us, lingering at the edges of the world. With autumn's arrival came the crackle of leaves beneath Lucy's boots, the scent of wood smoke in the air, and the comfort of routine. Meals shared, stories whispered by firelight, the promise of another winter survived together. But even as life settled into a new, gentle rhythm, the past refused to stay quiet. Old wounds, like the chill in the wind, would sneak in at unexpected times. Sometimes I'd hear Amanda on the phone late at night, her voice sharp and low, still arguing with distant relatives or a memory she couldn't quite shake. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, I'd wake from dreams of that morning Evan told me to leave, the ache of those words as raw as the day I first heard them. I learned not to run from the pain. Instead, I met it head-on, letting it wash over me and pass through, refusing to let it poison the good we'd built. Instead of bitterness, I chose memory, honest, unvarnished, but not cruel. There were days I found myself alone, sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. On those days, I would let my thoughts wander, reliving the little moments that had changed my life. Lucy's arms around my neck, Amanda's wary smile turning warm, Evan's voice cracking with apology. I thought of my own mother, her wisdom echoing through every quiet act of forgiveness I managed. In those moments, I understood just how much strength it took to stay. Not just to remain in the house, but to remain open. Open to love, to hurt, to the possibility of being cast out again. I realized that the revenge I'd carried was never really about payback. It was about refusing to disappear, about insisting on my place in this family, even if I had to build it day by day with my own two hands. It was about teaching the ones I loved what it meant to need someone without shame. That lesson came home one evening as we prepared for Lucy's birthday. She was turning 7 and wanted a party like in the movies, balloons, cake, all her friends, and her whole family around her. Amanda took charge of decorations, Evan wrangled the invitations, and I baked the cake, my hands steady even as my heart raced with old fears. What if I wasn't enough? What if all this peace was just a fragile illusion, ready to shatter at the first harsh word or misunderstanding? Those fears tried to root themselves in my heart, but I pushed them away. Instead, I focused on the task at hand, pouring all my love into the simple act of stirring batter, icing layers, arranging candles. I hummed an old lullaby as I worked, the song my mother used to sing when the world felt too heavy. On the day of the party, our house filled with laughter and chaos, children's voices rising above the clatter of dishes, Amanda's friends mixing with mine, Evan beaming with pride as Lucy tore through her presents. I stood back and watched it all, letting the happiness soak in. At one point, Amanda's mother called from out of state, and Amanda put her on speaker so everyone could say hello. When it was my turn, Amanda's mother said, "Thank you, Ruth, for everything you've done. Amanda tells me this house wouldn't be a home without you." It was such a simple thing, a few words spoken across miles, but it felt like the closing of a circle, an acknowledgement of everything I'd fought for and refused to let slip away. As the sun set and the guests left, Lucy climbed into my lap, sticky with frosting and sleep. "This was the best birthday ever, Grandma. Do you think next year we can do it again? Just like this?" I kissed her forehead, heart swelling with hope. "Of course, sweetheart. As long as you want." After she went to bed, Amanda lingered in the doorway, arms folded, her face soft. "You saved us, Ruth. I know I don't say it enough, but it's true. We would have fallen apart without you." I looked at her, this woman who had once seen me as a threat, now seeing me as family. "No one does it alone, Amanda. We hold each other up, one day at a time." Later that night, I sat with Evan on the porch, watching the northern lights shimmer across the sky. He took my hand, holding it tight. "I don't know if I'll ever deserve your forgiveness," he said quietly. "You already have it, Evan. That's what being a mother is." We sat together in the cold, letting the silence stretch, no longer heavy, but peaceful, each of us healed in ways words could never fully express. I thought again about revenge, about the lessons I wanted to leave behind. It was never about hurting anyone. It was about making sure the people I loved knew how much they needed me, even if they'd forgotten, even if they tried to push me out. And in that moment, I knew I had won. Quietly, completely, and with more love than I ever thought possible. The air turned crisp, and gold crept into the birches. Our house, once a place of shadows and biting words, grew warmer every day. Evenings were spent together now, Amanda and I side by side in the kitchen, Evan playing cards with Lucy at the table, laughter rising easily into the old beams overhead. When winter threatened, we stacked firewood and made jokes about who could shovel snow the fastest. There were quarrels, of course, small things now, over chores or bedtime or bills. But never again did I feel like a stranger in my son's home. Some nights I'd sit in the glow of the fire, my knitting needles clicking, listening as Amanda told Lucy stories about her own mother, about a childhood spent in a very different world. Sometimes Amanda would fall quiet, her eyes searching mine, silently asking if I remembered what it felt like to be new, uncertain, scared. I did. I always did. So I offered her what I'd always longed for myself: understanding, patience, a place where her worries could rest. Evan became softer, too. He'd touch my shoulder as he passed, sometimes stopping to apologize again, even when there was no need. "I don't think I ever said thank you, Mom. Not the way you deserved," he'd murmur, his voice thick with memory and regret. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Sometimes, when the house was quiet and Lucy was asleep, Amanda would seek me out. She'd bring tea, settle in beside me, and, with the weight of all those unspoken years between us, she'd say, "I used to think silence meant indifference. Now I see it can mean love." I'd squeeze her hand and say, "Silence is its own language. It can mean hurt, but it can also mean holding on, waiting for the world to come around." On Lucy's 8th birthday, she stood before a room full of friends and family, holding a slice of cake in one hand, her cheeks pink with excitement. "I'm glad Grandma came home," she said, clear as a bell. "She makes everything better." The room fell silent, and for a moment I saw in everyone's eyes a flicker of understanding about what had been lost and what had been found. There were still moments, late at night, when old pain crept in, the sting of Evan's words, the loneliness of those first weeks alone, the fear that one day it could all slip away again. I'd sit by my window, watching the moon rise over the trees, and I'd remember the lesson I'd learned on that long, cold road back to myself. Being needed is not a weakness. Needing others is not shameful. And revenge doesn't always come in thunder or fury. Sometimes it's the gentlest act, the smallest mercy, that leaves the deepest mark. The true revenge was this: I had built a life no one could erase. I'd turned my exile into belonging. I had found a way to forgive, not just my family but myself, for ever doubting my own worth. I became the heartbeat of a house that once wanted me gone. As winter came again, I gathered my family close. We sat around the table, hands clasped, eyes bright with the memories we'd made together and the hope for those still to come. "Silence is not surrender," I said quietly. "Age does not mean weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to keep loving, even when the world tells you not to. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear." Evan squeezed my hand, Amanda brushed a tear away, and Lucy crawled into my lap, whispering, "I love you, Grandma." So if you have a story, if you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, or pushed aside, don't let the world decide your worth. Find your voice, even if it's quiet. Hold on even when it hurts. Your story matters. Your presence matters. If my story spoke to your heart, share your own below. And if you found hope or comfort in my words, please subscribe, because every story, even the quietest one, deserves to be heard.